was so
Hi
slow.
everyone, welcome. You had to interrupt me. Hi everyone, welcome to Photomode Unplugged. We are your hosts, Ruben and Mick. It
Hi.
went better than last
Good.
week.
Yeah, well done. Do you know what we've not done for a while? Is
What?
actually said, how was your week?
It's been, yeah. We are trying to make the episode shorter, so we haven't discussed how our weeks went. So how was yours?
Yeah, it's a bad week to ask, isn't it? It's not been very interesting. I've been in the lab continuously, so yeah, busy, but not with anything fun.
Yeah, I just changed tasks in my job, so a lot of trainings and yeah.
But less customer service, is it?
No,
Still
just more important customers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. It's good for the career.
Yeah. If you want a career in customer service.
Yeah, that's the thing. Which I don't. But yeah, other than that, no time to play at all.
Literally nothing. I've played Season a little bit, actually. I'm really enjoying Season. I've been trying to write my post about it, and I wasn't sure how to write it. I can start off with just something about this as a photographic theme of the game. And then I was like, it's kind of ended up as a review, which is kind of unfair because it doesn't have a photo mode as such. It's an in-game camera. But yeah, I need to get that finished.
Every review that I read from it said that Season is one of the best games to come out.
Yeah, it's really good.
Like Shadow Drop, not in really that big of a marketing push. And
they've had a few trailers.
A few trailers, but I haven't seen many. It's not like a proper AAA launch.
No, it's a little indie.
It's supported by PlayStation, but still.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious once the price drops.
Oh well, mine was free.
Get me, mine was free. I was looking at games. I have no games to play that I'm interested in. I have a lot to replay, but no new games or games in my backlog. So I was looking at games that I miss. Games are really expensive nowadays.
Yeah, I know. Well, everything is, but yes, games. They just they're too high a price where you think I'll just try that. You always have to wait for it to come down, and I think people are missing out on games because of it.
Midnight Suns is free on Steam this weekend,
is it?
So I might give it a try, but still, it's really expensive. Can I finish it in one weekend?
Probably not, no.
So, what's the topic this week?
Well, I think you wanted to do, because everyone keeps asking for it, and we didn't know what to do.
It's probably our most requested topic, isn't it?
I think it is. Currently, it's probably our only requested topic. It's more of that, comments go, oh, it'd be nice if you did something more about... So it's editing is what people are asking for. How
to grow on social media is one that people keep asking, and we...
Oh, they don't ask me that.
But we don't know the answer to that question.
No, I don't.
The formula.
It changes.
It's different for
as well.
Yeah.
But yes,
it's about
editing. How should you and how do you edit your virtual photography photographs? Your virtual photographs. So
should we jump right ahead to should you?
Start with should, yeah. The question of should before the how or why. It is, by the way. Yeah, I think so. So.
You think so? Why? I'm curious.
Because, right, so I guess there's two contexts to have on this. One is if you look at it from a real world photography perspective, all professional level photographs are edited. And I said this, it might have been last week, But if you shoot RAW, as in the raw file on the camera, that is the information from the sensor, and it's quite flat and it needs to be edited to look its best. It's literally just the information that the light hitting the sensor gave. If you let the camera produce a JPEG, it still gets the same information from the sensor, and it just converts that into an image that it thinks is what it should look like. So it guesses what the exposure, well, the brightness, the overall brightness should be. Obviously, the exposure is controlled by your camera setup. It guesses exactly what those color tones are. So again, you can manually set a white balance, but it's still converting it for you. So the JPEG is really an edit of the RAW itself. It's the camera's edit. So photographers typically shoot RAW because that gives you the most control, and then you edit that to produce the best looking image you can have, but also maybe to stylize it. So if you look at pro photography, they've always got a bit of a style to their shots. They don't look like a normal camera phone type picture. There's always something extra to it. That's more developing, really. I would say that's developing and post-processing. More will separate then, I think, editing in a developing software like Lightroom or Darktable is an alternative, versus, say, Photoshop. So, do you know what I mean there? Like, what would you, if I said, would you use Lightroom or Photoshop, what would you think is the difference?
I think, okay, Lightroom is more for color editing and contrast.
Yeah.
That and Photoshop is more image manipulation.
Exactly. Yeah. So you would call Photoshop a raster editor. So that's like literally a pixel editor. Whereas something like Lightroom is manipulating, with a RAW file at least, is manipulating what that light information is interpreted into.
Okay.
So that's for
Lightroom. The name.
Exactly, yeah. So
that's great.
Exactly. So film photography used to be developed in a dark room. Yeah. So this is a play on that, really. So that's real world photography. Photographers do edit their pictures. It's not purely for modification. It's part of the process. It's part of getting that raw information into the best possible picture it can be. So the flip of that then is, how does that apply to a game photograph? Because you don't have the equivalent of a raw file from a game.
It's more in line with photographing with your phone, a really good phone, right?
It kind of is. I think a lot of people would probably disagree on this topic. Some will say you should edit, some will say you absolutely should not edit. And I think the ones who say you should not is based on being truthful and being the fidelity towards the game. So because that isn't raw light, it's essentially already, they're seeing the game as the product already. That's the finished look. So the interpretation is that you shouldn't be changing that. But I still disagree, and I think you should.
Aren't you, in theory, already editing? Like you put you build your own composition, and then you are basically editing with, like, changing the contrast, changing the exposure, putting up a filter, changing the sharpening, the vignette, the film grain. You are, in theory, already editing. You are just... With Lightroom, we are not sponsored by Adobe, but it's the one that we use, and it's available to anyone that wants to use. So that's why we are mentioning it so much.
It's also kind of the industry standard, so it's fair enough.
What you're basically doing with post-editing with an app is what PC players already do with camera tools and Reshade.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Reshade specifically has one shader called Lightroom.
Okay.
and that's the one that I use. That's why mostly I don't edit in Lightroom anymore. Mm-hmm. I edit while taking the shot.
Yeah. Because that's something I've always found strange. Because one of the arguments that you hear is, oh, it's not fair if some people use this third-party software because not everybody's got it. But you could even level that at one Photomode versus another, where you can say, well, that Photomode's got contrast and saturation, and that one doesn't. So does that mean that you shouldn't use the features that are exclusive to that one? No, of course it doesn't. You use the features that are there. So I never buy into that argument of, oh, it's not fair because not everybody's got, it's not equal. That's nonsense.
And it's strange because Reshade is, even when you install, they say all shaders should be free. And Lightroom is free. You can
to an
install
extent,
it.
Yeah.
You can, well, most features that you use to edit are free.
I haven't actually tried what Lightroom CC lets you do now. It used to be more limited, and it definitely used to not even work with RAW files unless you were subscribed. I don't know if that's the case now.
Okay, I have no idea about that. I never tried it with RAW files.
Okay, so I do use it with RAW files, but I've also got an Adobe subscription, so it obviously works. You don't get the cloud sync, because that's useful actually. Yeah, syncing.
I have the cloud sync. I think it's €3 per month, and you have the premium mobile version that lets you sync with a web browser.
Okay.
So you can edit on the browser.
Yeah. Anyway, before I forget, because you said something about the Photomode itself is kind of already editing. It absolutely is. It is changing how if you're thinking it should be true to the game's appearance, the Photomode shot is invariably not. And filters are the easiest example of that, because filters are basically a one-button edit. They're an overall edit.
The only game that I can remember that you can say, oh, but I can apply filters to the gameplay is The Last of Us. Any Naughty Dog game, you can play with the filters
while it's playing.
While you're playing.
Yeah.
Others don't. I can't remember of a single one that.
I think there probably are, but yeah. So it's usually unlocked after a first playthrough or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. But yeah, everything you do in a photo mode, apart from composition, all of those other tabs is a post-process step. Yeah. And Gran Turismo is actually probably the heaviest one on that. That and Days Gone. They've got really in-depth, possibly too much in a way.
Yeah.
But, you can transform. It looks nothing like the game. And actually then, that's quite a good creative tool, and people enjoy that. So what's the difference between using off-console or off-game software?
Days Gone is really slept on the photo mode front. They introduce really cool features.
It was excellent. It was clever as well that they separated the basic mode and the advanced mode. So and
lets you create your own in advance, create your own presets and apply them in. If the game wasn't that so big, I would replay it because I remember I played it twice and the photo mode kept me entertained. But other thing is, when you make the argument you want to stay true to the game, that means that maybe the developer doesn't. You think that developer maybe doesn't want you to edit, but they give you the tools and they share content that is been heavily edited on their socials. So
so heavily edit is an interesting sort of boundary, I would say.
Days Gone is one that you can heavily
in the
change.
Photo mode.
In the photo mode. Photo mode. I'm talking about in the photo mode, not outside.
When I talk about
those who do.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I was just rumbling, like I always do.
When I was saying you should edit, then I do think that you should, in order to make the image at the best it can be. The bit, when I said I differentiate between, say, the use of development in Lightroom and post-process and photoshopping. So with real photography as well, I don't like manipulation of content, like when you see a lone tree but there was loads of other trees, but they've just removed them because that's going too far. That feels like that's no longer just a photograph. That's using photograph as a base material for some other digital art. So that kind of editing, it's not that I disagree with it. It's just something I don't like to do, and I think it's a different art form itself. You know, that it's an image manipulation. So when you say people who heavily edit, people do sometimes heavily edit their Photomode shots outside the game, and that might just
even with reshades.
Well, Reshade especially, because there's
I would love to learn to. I actually saw tutorials on how to do what some people do in Reshade, and I just think you can do that much more easily using Photoshop. Like, why use Reshade instead of?
Yeah, especially when you're injecting separate assets that are not in the game to start with. They may as well just be a separate layer. Masks and layers would do all of that. But there's a lot of skill in being able to compose that as well. So that was part of the motivation to add the creative category in the awards, because I want to see what is it people can kind of come up with by using Photomode assets and then doing more with it. I think that should be encouraged. It just comes down to whether, if you were to try and pass off a heavily edited shot and try and pretend it's not, I guess that's where people will probably disapprove. Do you know what I mean? Yeah,
especially in contests like the VP Awards or
Cyberpunk banned edits.
Cyberpunk banned edits.
And I think they banned mods as well, which is a massive part of Cyberpunk.
At least the first few times that they ran the contest, I know they banned mods. I'm not sure if they still do it in the most recent ones, but they receive a lot of backlash by the modding community in that front. I saw some comments about it.
Yeah.
Which is strange, because especially Cyberpunk, like, people heavily mod Cyberpunk.
Exactly. In fact,
and the mods are free.
I'd say it relies on it.
Yeah.
Actually. But yeah. In terms, especially we're going to like what we do then. As in to what extent we do or do not do edits.
I'm lazy, so I don't. It's just a matter of it's not a matter of what I can get in the photo mode. It's just a matter of it's adding an extra step that for a few years I did. I've been doing this for 4.5 years now, and I would say like half of that time I was editing and half I wasn't. I go back and forwards in it, but since the Lightroom mobile and the browser version doesn't let you extract the file in PNG,
that is
which
strange.
Is weird.
It is strange. I don't know why, because Lightroom Classic you can export as a PNG. So for anyone not aware, PNG, a portable network graphic, is a non-compressed image file. JPEGs are compressed image files, so you usually get some sort of slider for the JPEG quality, and the lower it is, the smaller the file, but the more heavily compressed the image is, and you get lots of really nasty artifacts. You know, you'll see it if you see like a logo that's been really low quality then blown up, and you get all this big blocky horrible mess around the letters and that's compression artifacts, and you get that in JPEGs. You can put up to like 100% quality, and it's pretty close to a non-compressed file then, but inevitably there is some. There's also actually, I mean, I agree PNGs are better, and I capture in PNGs, but you also have to think about what's the end result going to be, and if it's, say, on social media, when it's compressed with JPEG anyway, there's only so far you can keep and maintain the quality.
I always post thinking about Flickr. So when people ask me, "Oh, can you give me the best version of this?" I will link you the Flickr, and you can download it, use it for whatever. Oh, funny story. PlayStation Portugal actually reached out to me.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, they asked me for a couple of shots. I can't say why, but
Okay.
I sent them.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like immediately. Like I replied to the email like 5 minutes after.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to seem
received it.
desperate or anything.
No, the thing is, they asked me and they invited me to something, and I can't go, but
Oh.
it was kind of funny because they don't reply to my emails.
Well, there you go. Now they do. So you can stop complaining. You're friends again.
We never actually told the story. The God of War Ragnarok story.
No, well, that's not allowed today because that's a totally different matter. We'll do one about review games, about reviewing and getting review games, I guess.
Yeah.
We'll do one on that.
And that it will be a nice episode to talk about my God of War Ragnarok story.
Seeing as we've got diverted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Would you like to inject a joke at this juncture?
I wouldn't, but you can. I will allow it.
We're now at the point where we daren't not tell a joke because there will be a backlash. Fear
from our 3 consistent viewers.
Look, everybody who watches likes the jokes. That is irrefutable. I have one prepared.
Go ahead.
Why can a T-Rex not clap its hands?
He's dead.
Oh, yes! You got it. Because they're extinct. Damn you.
Sometimes I can think about stuff.
Yeah? Well, you always try and guess the joke. This punchline.
Isn't that part of the fun?
I don't know, is it? Let us know.
Yeah, to me it is.
Okay. Let us know in the comments. Like and subscribe, etc. So, where were we?
Somewhere about the editing process.
And so what do we do? So
I was saying about Flickr. I know that about social media, like the compressed version, especially on Instagram. Their compression is
appalling. Yeah.
The better quality that you post, the worse the photo will look like. And I'm not even joking, because if I post from my, I don't know if you know this, but now you can post from your PC to Instagram. If I post my upscaled photos of even higher than 4K, they look terrible on Instagram. Terrible, because their compression sucks.
Yeah.
Just bad.
I'm not surprised. Yeah, it's always been like that, and it just discourages you from actually putting anything that looks nice on there, because you look and think, what's happened? Yeah. But so whether I do, yes, I do. My edits. So originally, when I started, I kind of was tempted to stick with this. Let's just keep it true and non-modified. And I quickly thought, what's the point? Because I don't treat normal photography like that. I actually sometimes regret shooting in RAW because you've got so much extra work to do. But at least with a game, it's kind of optional. But I just believe that I've said it many times, that when you take a shot on your big, huge TV in a dark room, the shadow detail can come across nicely to you. And then when you look at it on your phone in the daylight, in a small screen, it just doesn't look as good. So you want to balance that out. There's nothing to say, by the way, that the game's presentation is perfect. You could even have the game's brightness and HDR settings set
Yeah.
to varying degrees, which alter that in the first place. So you absolutely should bring it to a level that looks good on all screens. Going slightly beyond that, I like to just tweak the color tones a little bit. I said before that I don't like green casts on things, despite this sort of thing. But I mean, when it's like really permeating everything, I always think it just looks dingy. And if you tweak the colors, you can take out some of that. You can really make things crisper and pop more. And it's the kind of thing that without it looking wrong, it just looks that little bit better. And people might not realize why it looks better, but they just see and they just get more from the image. And that's what it's all about, is making it so that the viewer engages with the shot. So, yeah,
and
do it, and it gets better.
I think there is a learning curve to editing, and looking at yours, they don't seem edited. If you were to ask me before we had conversation about it, I would say yours weren't edit, and there is a learning curve to that, and many people over edit or don't edit enough in the beginning. I'm one of those people. I tend to not edit enough because I'm afraid to over edit,
which is easily done, in fairness. Usually the ways that you can see ones that need editing and haven't done is because they're just too dark, and the images are simply too dark. That's the most common flaw with a non-edited photo mode shot. Over edits are invariably ridiculous color, like far too much saturation, and sharpening.
Sharpening, which is weird. I don't even sharpen my image nowadays.
Well,
at all.
Again, I've said it before, but games tend to not need much sharpening because you're already kind of rendered at perfect pixels. You're not fighting soft optics or anything because it's a rendering, and they're inherently quite sharp. So any amount of sharpening tends to push it over. You can get away with a little bit, but invariably I'd steer clear of sharpening. You mentioned that mine tend to look not edited, and that's because rather than trying to make it as though I've not touched the game, I try to make it representative, like it, so it looks, if you take the game as reality, I want to keep it looking realistic. And I kind of do the same with my photographs anyway. I don't really do many stylized edits as such. So that's really about identifying what it is you want to improve or take out of a shot. And like I said, a sort of a green overtone I'd like to get rid of, but keeping it looking natural. Natural is probably the right word there. Even if it's a fantasy game, it can still look natural because it looks believable when it's natural.
Yeah. And you want to make it natural in that world. Yeah. That's the thing. You don't want to put like neon feather leaves in because you can't change the hues in the Lightroom. You don't want to do something like that. You want to stay true to the game.
But should someone want to do that, then that's fair enough. And I'd be always interested to see the ideas, because you could kind of recreate UV photography by doing that. So you typically see UVs all like magenta and greens and that. So you can recreate something like that if you're trying to sort of pursue a style. Yeah, no reason why not.
There's a great UV filter in Spider-Man that I use all the time, and then I tweak it to
dial it down a bit.
Yeah.
All in-game filters should have a intensity slider. Yeah. I really don't like it when they don't have that, because otherwise it always kind of looks the same.
Can't remember the last game that I played that doesn't have an intensity filter.
I don't know offhand, but there definitely are some. It more so with older. There definitely have been. Yeah, of course there has.
Oof. Don't do that to your game. Don't do that.
In fact, Season for a start has a few. It's got about 5 or 6 filters, and they're just preset. It doesn't necessarily count because it's not a full photo mode, but just as an example. But yeah, invariably, like I said, it just means that every shot looks like that filter. Then it's too overpowering.
And you know exactly the filter that was used.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't like to. In some shots, I don't want people to know immediately, like the Atreus filter in God of War. It's a great one when you're fighting, for instance, Baldur or Thor, because of the blues.
Yeah.
You want to make them pop, and if you use it 100%, you know the filter was applied there.
But yeah, bringing it down makes it more subtle, and again, it keeps it looking more natural while also shifting the feel of the image a little bit. So yeah.
Do you have any advice for people starting out?
I was just going to say, do you think then that the next most asked, I don't know if it's an asked question, but something I see people say is that they're not sure what to do when editing?
No.
I guess you could, if you want to just try different styles, because there's different approaches to this, isn't there? Like you could go with the filter approach and just try the sort of one-click edits.
Choose the presets. The Lightroom has really Colin, when
don't get that right.
Colin, sorry for calling you Kevin. I have no idea why I call Colin when he was at band. He was one of my first guests in Snap. We were talking about editing, and he only did one thing. And it was going to Lightroom and apply the matte filter to his photos. Yeah. And that was it.
I've never used presets. I never have. I occasionally look at them for a matter of inspiration for something, but I don't ever use them because I end up thinking it's not quite right. And then you've got to edit it anyway. So I think.
Oh, but now you have the intent. Okay, Lightroom now offers you the intensity that you want your filters to have, and then you can tweak it. Lightroom is really a complete package. If you think of something, it's probably available in Lightroom nowadays.
Well, so the market leader should be, there's lots of things that do this without that level of complexity as well, though. I know, like, just the intensity side is not difficult, but the trouble when you've got all the other stuff there is you're tempted to think, I should be using those, or I'll just get drawn into. But there's even mobile apps that will do simple, different color filters and things. Twitter and Instagram have got it anyway, don't they? You can choose to edit the shot before attaching it. I think that's the simplest way to start if you're just wanting to get a different look and a bit of inspiration or something. If you want to kind of do that manually, then it's difficult to say where to start. I do think Lightroom's, like I said, the industry standard, so it's probably the right thing to learn. If you're going to learn how to do it in something, you may as well go there. But don't be overwhelmed by the number of options. Maybe do it. It's got kind of sections, doesn't it? So your first one's all about light. Start with that before messing up anything to do with colors and sharpness and stuff. Just try them. Just mess about. I don't know. What do you want to do? Should we give an example of how each edit can work, or what?
I usually just go to the AI presets.
You go to AI, okay. So what now then? A tutorial session on what I think the Lightroom options offer. Would that help?
Do you have Lightroom with you?
Yes. Well, it's on this machine, yeah. Okay, we'll just open Lightroom.
Okay, let me open mine then.
I'll tell you how, at least my interpretation of what each setting does. Okay, so if you don't have Lightroom, then if you look up something on, there'll be tons of videos on YouTube, and you'll just be able to see the stuff down the side there. I think if you go to Adobe,
that's something that I think everyone should start with, is watch a video on like first steps, and also Lightroom has some tutorials available.
Oh, it does actually. And it takes you through examples and lets you edit a shot with the guide. Yeah, they're quite good. So yeah, looking at this then, the first section is on light. So the first slider is exposure, and that's fairly obvious. That is like the overall brightness of the image. So the higher the exposure, the brighter the image, the lower, then the darker it is. Straight underneath that is contrast. And now this differs from exposure in that is the difference between the range from black to white. So the higher the contrast, the more it's pushed to.
Okay.
If you look at the histogram, the graph, that is the distribution of where the light lies. So you've got black at one end, you've got white at the other, and all the shades in between. And then you'll have one of those for red, green, and blue, and one for overall. Pushing the contrast up will move that to the edges. So you've got stronger blacks and brighter whites. If you go zero contrast, everything kind of becomes grey and homogenized in the middle. So you want some contrast because it gives definition to different elements and to the darks and the lights. But you can overdo it, as with everything.
Can we just a little bit?
Yes.
Why call it exposure and not brightness?
That's a reasonably good question. I'm not entirely. So if you were, so it's exposure. It's actually more often called exposure compensation. Okay. So your exposure comes from the camera term. So it's how long you expose the film or the sensor for to the light. So if you want to compensate for that exposure to make it brighter, you're going to give a positive exposure compensation. So your exposure was too short. You want to compensate for that by increasing it effectively. So that's what you're doing in the post process. You're compensating the exposure. So that's why the result is the brightness of the image. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Good. So I think the thing that's most confusing then in Lightroom is that the next four things are highlights, shadows, whites and blacks.
Yeah.
And do you know the difference?
No.
Well,
kind of. The highlights are like the brightest points in the photo, right? Mm-hmm. You're controlling the brightest points in the photo.
Yeah.
The blacks, well, they are the darkest.
But so are the shadows.
Okay.
So essentially, you can take these as two slightly separate pairs. So the highlights and shadows are like doing exposure. So it's like doing the brightness, but only to specific areas of the image. So if you increase the highlight slider, that will increase the brightness of the highlights, of the bits that are already quite bright. Or you can decrease that. So if you think the highlights, the exposure overall is pretty good, but the sky is a typical highlight, is a bit too bright, so just bring that down and you can see more cloud detail then. Or similarly with the shadows, you think those dark areas are just a bit too dark that the shadow detail's lost, but I don't want to blow out the sky, so I bring up the shadows and you can balance the shot a little bit better. So your histogram, rather than being skewed over to one end, you can sort of fill in the other section. The difference between whites and blacks. Now, if you just go mad with it, you see a similar thing. You think if I move the whites up, things get brighter. What it actually is white point and black point, and it's setting where, at what level of brightness or what level of grey, everything becomes white, or at what level going down, everything becomes black. So if you increase, if you drag down the black point, then more greys become black. So that has the effect of making a shadow area darker. Does that make sense? It's like you've got less range of grey in there, and more of it becomes just black, and the other way, more of it becomes just white. So it has the effect of making darker areas darker or lighter, but you're reducing the number of shades in there by doing it. Whereas if you bring up the shadows, you're not changing the shades, you're just making each one of them brighter. So they're subtly different ways of doing a similar thing. They tend to go hand in hand. You have to use them both together. Make sense?
I should probably have known that, this whole thing.
I don't think it's obvious, though. I think that's something you would easily not understand the difference.
Yeah, because when I am editing manually instead of using a preset, I always go, okay, these basically do the same thing.
Yeah.
They are close enough that I don't have to learn what they specifically do.
Once you understand what they do, you can use them in a more nuanced way.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's good if you watch the histogram. You can kind of see, if you drag up the whites, you'll see the graph shoot up right up on the right-hand side because the amount of signal in the white area just goes up really high. Essentially what it's doing is taking that span of the distribution of light and pushing, say from half, pushing the top half of it way over to the whites. So a certain level of brightness will always become white. So you can lose detail if you do it too much. The final thing on the light thing is the actual curves. And this is the thing I use most for my shots. So that's probably again why they tend to look quite natural, is because curves lets you just manipulate the light and the darkness that's already there rather than changing it too much. You mentioned that Colin does a matte filter. So I use matte blacks a lot because I think pure black, like darkest black, very rarely exists. Everything like the surface of this mic here has got some shade of grey to it.
Yeah.
To be absolutely black, that means no light's coming off it whatsoever. So I don't like too strong a black. And I like the matte look. It kind of gives it a print feel, actually. So the easy way to do that on the curve is to grab the bottom left corner and just straight up the line, keep the same line, and you'll see that cuts off everything. What you're doing there is making the opposite of moving the black slider down, which is saying these greys are now black. It's bringing up the point where it says that black now does no longer exist, and this is the darkest point you can get to. So everything will cut off there, and it becomes the same shade of dark grey instead of fully black, and that's how you get a matte filter. So
cool.
Yeah.
It's the first time that I'm using them while you speak.
That's good. Yeah, and that's the way to learn.
And I'm actually, I think it's the first time that I'm doing a matte look without the matte filter.
I expect credit on your next post.
I'm actually editing one photo of Danny, so.
But yeah, I love a matte look. It doesn't really work the same with the highlights. You tend to just look like you've blown out the highlights. So, but giving a matte black is nice. For the rest of the curve, you can kind of use it in a similar way to those sliders. So by dragging different areas along that. So the curve is a diagonal line that runs across the histogram. So the graph in the background is the same as the histogram. So that's the distribution of light from light to dark, from dark to light, whichever. You can also do it again per red, green and blue color channels. So if you drag down that line on the left hand side, then you're going to affect the darker areas of the image. If you drag that up, then you're going to make the darker areas brighter. And you can put different points on, and you can sort of lift one end and drop the other, and you can change the overall shape of the curve. And you can create or remove contrast by doing that. You can very subtly balance the midtones from the shadows and from the highlights. You've got really fine control with the curves. Curves is the best tool in there. And you didn't know about it, did you?
I never used. I ignored the curve.
That's you shouldn't. Curves is the main thing. You can also do if you do it on the color channels individually, you get into a bit of a minefield because you start to shift the overall tone. Use the color channel curves very carefully. But if you just stick to the main one, it's just white, but that means overall, then yeah, it's excellent. So next up then is color. Color temperature. Color temperature is a weird one, and it comes from how cameras see white. It's white balance essentially. It's what controls how blue or yellow the image is. So the color temperature means the temperature of light, and it's actually again it's in reverse in the software because this is compensating for the color temperature that did exist.
Oh, okay.
So blue in light, a hotter light or a hotter star burns blue, and it goes white and into blue. So the bluer the light, the hotter it is. The yellower the light, the colder it is. But in terms of what we think for a picture, you think yellow is a warm color temperature, blue is the cold. Yeah. But what you're doing there is you're telling the camera, or you're telling the picture, right, the camera's got the color temperature slightly wrong. It was warmer than this, so we have to add in some more blue. So the reason why, do you know what I mean? It's the reverse on the edit.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're just compensating to try and make white look white, or grey, essentially the grey point look neutral grey.
That's how it works in games too. It's a standard now, the way this works.
It absolutely is. Like I say, it is the reverse because it's a compensation for what the camera's done. But if you just take it from the game, for example, and you want to make it look warmer, as in more bathed in sunlight, then you just take that up. It's in the unit, by the way, is in K, so it's kelvins, and that's to do with the temperature of the light that's produced. That's in the physical temperature, but nobody relates to that. Like, what is 6,000 Kelvin? You don't have a measure for that, do you? 5,000 Kelvin's normal daylight around there, I think. But yeah, so just use that to shift. It blue one way, yellow the other. The next one down, tint. I don't know where this comes from. This.
Yeah, I never.
Yeah.
Why is it like pink?
Well, it's green and magenta, isn't it? So are they complementary colours? I think they are. I don't know what the origin of it is, and you can use it as part of the white balance.
You don't know something.
There is something I don't know, I'm afraid. Yeah.
Who are you? What have you done with me?
So, swiftly moving on to something else I do know. So the next two, vibrance and saturation. Vibrance is newer, and that was added to address the shortcomings of saturation. So saturation increases how strong the colors are. Yeah. So if you go way up on the saturation, every color gets boosted. If it's a black and white image, nothing will happen, obviously. But every color goes up. The downside to that is sometimes it puts colors up that you don't really want to. And skin tones is the perfect example. If you boost the saturation, you end up with very orangey skin tones. It just does too much. Vibrance, on the other hand, will increase vivid colors without affecting the overall saturation. So it will keep skin tones in check. So you can put vibrance up higher than you can saturation without things looking weird, essentially. So when you see an over-edited photo mode shot that the colors are just off and you think they look unnatural, that's because they've used too much saturation, and they should have used less saturation and more vibrance.
More vibrant.
Yeah.
That explains why vibrant filters are so popular in photo modes.
They are actually, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. Even as the name, they call it vibrant.
Even if it's not like just vibrant, like they are changing other stuff. Like they put the image darker or use more contrast, they always call it vibrant. If the colors are popping, it's called vibrant.
Yeah. They do. That I don't like ones that change lots of other things as well, because it's like, well, I kind of want that, but without what else you've done there. Yeah. I don't like the limitations of filters. What have we got next? So color mixer. This is just individual. You can now do saturation per color channel. So you've got like the whole rainbow of colors, like the whole spectrum. And if you wanted to create that a trace filter, you just turn every color off except for blue.
I used to. I think it was my second playthrough of God of War when I found out the color mixture and just went crazy with it with most of my shots.
Yeah, why not? The best way to learn is to do things and you find what went wrong, and then you go, when you look back, you go, ooh, I don't like that anymore. And then that means you've developed from it. So you've learned what you could do with it, and you've done too much, and now you've stepped back. It's not a bad part of the process.
I use the mixture a lot in my, like, while traveling. When I snap something with my phone and I want to look good for Instagram, I always edit on Lightroom before posting, and I use the mixture a lot.
Yeah. Cool. I'm getting short on time if we're going to keep it under the hour, aren't we? So
are we?
Yeah.
Oof, we are.
52. Right. So color grading, we'll just quickly skip over, but you can essentially assign a color cast to the shadows, the highlights and things. So you can create a split tone with that. If you've ever seen, like a two-tone image where the highlights might be yellow and the shadows are kind of an inky blue, you could create that.
Oh, I never used it. I'm using it for the first time.
Yeah.
Cool.
So now we move on to things that are nothing to do with the brightness or the light or the colors, but are to do with the detail in the image. So it used to just simply have sharpening and film grain, and there's now lots of more specific versions of that. So you've got texture and clarity, which do a very similar thing, but on a different scale. So it's kind of localized contrast. The texture is kind of a localized contrast, slightly sharpening on fine details. Clarity is kind of that, but on for larger objects. If you whack up the clarity, you'll see things become very gnarly and like like very over textured, and it look a bit weird. Don't overdo it.
A Picasso. Filter.
Yeah. Dehaze is kind of, think of it as removing fog. So if things have got soft grays, it will take the grays away and make it a more defined color or a more defined black or white. You can also add haze by going the other way. Vignette, everyone knows, is just the darkening around the edge. That's a kind of a lens effect.
It is? Whoa.
Yeah. You would usually use that in processing a RAW to take off the vignette effect of a lens. So like if you don't want the darkening that a lens suffers from, because that means it's not able to put the light around all of its frame. It's not able to focus the light as much in those areas. Focus is wrong. You would use it to get rid of the vignette, but you can add it if you want to use that as a style. I don't. There you go. Grain is essentially a simulation of film grain. You can add that in Lightroom.
I wanted to go into grain because I never understood grain, and you explained it to me a few times.
Ever? You still don't know?
Until I saw your Forbidden West when they added grain.
Yeah.
The three images side by side.
Yeah. That
you did. It was the click moment to me. Okay, now I understand why grain exists.
Yeah.
In photo mode.
So in photo modes, you never suffer from film grain. So film grain comes from proper film cameras. So the sensitivity of the film, and quite often from cinema, because you have to use a sensitive film to capture moving images. Otherwise, it's blurry. So with sensitivity comes interference, essentially. So that's the grain. On a digital camera, it's noise. So you get, if you just try it, if you've got a camera and look at something in the dark, even your smartphone will probably do it. If you just look at darkness, you'll see some, like red and green spots appearing. And that's just noise on the sensor. It thinks it's picking up a signal and it's trying to show a signal. So the higher you boost that, the more that noise shows. So grain is about adding that to sort of recreate, because the game doesn't have it. It's very pristine, and if you want to shoot in a dark area like I did in that Forbidden West shot, there should be a bit of grain to look authentic. So you just feed it in. You can overdo it and then it looks really rough and a bit weird. But yeah. The opposite of that is noise reduction. So you're taking off those things. And be careful with noise reduction because you start to lose detail as well. If you crank up the noise reduction, then yes, you will get rid of grain and you'll get rid of noise, but you'll also get rid of actual surface textures and even skin detail. So you'll see like a very smoothed off skin.
Yeah. It explains the plastic look of some image.
Yeah. So, and then in between that, you've got sharpening, which is kind of, if you think of edges, it sharpens the definition between edges. So it can enhance textures. It will, make fine details clearer. But as soon as you overdo it, then you get edge artifacts. And you get like a halo and a glow on edges that looks very unnatural. It makes them almost look embossed, I always think. I don't know if you know what I mean. Like, imagine if it was kind of wrapped in clear vinyl and you've got this sort of gloss, an unnatural gloss to it. That's how I sort of imagine what it's doing to it. But that's an edge artifact of it over sharpening and trying to define an edge too much by creating contrast either side of it.
It's very noticeable in some Spider-Man suits. Not every, but you can sharpen so many of your shots in Spider-Man because of the suits and how the suits react to the textures in the suit react to the sharpening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In terms of Lightroom, I think the rest of what's in there we don't need to cover because you've got chromatic aberration, which isn't, these are removing lens flaws now. So you would actually load a lens profile and it will account for the known defects of that, where we don't have them in a Photomode. But everything from there up, you absolutely can use to good effect.
And should to give it your style, I think you should.
It's both to give it your style and to give it its best appearance. Let it look its best. There's nothing won by avoiding it. There's no pride to be had, really. People do say, Photomode only, no edits. But that just means that you've not given it every step. You've not given it everything it deserves.
Yep. I agree. Yeah. You shouldn't be lazy like I am. You should edit your shots.
That's not to say that unedited shots can't be good, because they can. But don't be afraid of doing it.
Just look at my shots.
Don't be afraid of doing it. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You set yours like it was the perfect setup.
And on that bombshell, we shall end.
Yeah, you're doing the goodbyes this week.
Am I? Oh well.
Yeah, you are.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone. Hope you enjoyed. You thought I was just gonna stop there again, didn't you? I don't know. What do you usually say? I can't remember.
Bye.
Yeah, bye. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if there is anything we didn't cover, I know that was kind of heavily focused on Lightroom. So if there's anything you want to know that's broader than that, do let us know in the comments. Thanks everyone for watching.
If you use another app that isn't Lightroom, I would like to know that.
Yeah. We might do some more of this because we can cover more specifics. Upscaling again, we can do some more on upscaling because that's worthwhile. Yeah. Cool. Thanks a lot for watching. Like and subscribe. Keep that in there. Bye.